Now that we worked on the shopping list, we could move on to the recipes, but that's something I want to save for later. For the moment, let's instead move on to the auth section here. And let's implement NGRX there as well. Now, for this, I'll add a new folder in the auth folder, and I'll name it store. And just as with the shopping list, I want to create a reducer and a file with the relevant actions for authenticating. Now, for authentication, you will also see that, of course, we interact with the web here in the auth service. We send requests for signing users up and signing users in. And that is something I'll also take care about later, because we can't send these requests from inside a reducer. But for the moment, we'll leave them in the service and we'll step by step move them into the NGRX world as well. So back to the store then. Let's add a auth.reducer.ts file. And in that auth reducer file, what do we need to export? Well, we definitely need our reducer function, right? Because, keep in mind, a reducer is a function in the end. So here I have my auth reducer function, and this again receives a state and an action. Now, for the moment, I'll just return state in there, but of course, we'll soon also add a switch case statement in there. Now, this auth state, of course, will have some initial state. So again, I'll create an initial state object here. And now let's have a look at what our authentication state actually is. At the moment, we're managing it in auth service. And if we take a closer look, in the end, it's just this user object here, which we manage through a behavior subject. The token expiration timer, that is only required for our auto logout timer. And we'll see how we handle this later, but it's not a core part of our auth state. We never use that from outside of the service, and we can't because it's a private property. So the only state that we use in other parts of the app is our user object here. And therefore, that has to be part of my initial state. I have a user, and initially that user will be null. Now, just as with the shopping list reducer here, I want to define an interface that describes my state, which will help us with injecting a store where we want to access that user or that authentication state slice. And therefore, let's export an interface, which we can also name state. We can name it state here, even though I also named it state in the shopping list reducer, because these are two different files, and therefore these names don't clash. And there I describe that my state for the auth part of my store will have the user key, and the type of that is user, using my user model, for which you of course have to add an import therefore. Now the initial state obviously is of type state, so let's add this type assignment. And here we want to initialize our state by setting it equal to the initial state, or that should be our default value for state to be precise, in case we don't have a state yet. So basically for when this store is created. Okay, so now we have that very basic auth reducer set up. Of course, we got no logic to set or remove our user here, so that's something we'll have to work on. Before we continue working on that, however, let's add our auth state slice, so this auth reducer and the state it produces, to our app module, so there to the store module. Here, to for root, I'll add auth, and you can name this however you want. I'll name it auth because it is about the auth part of my application. And there, I want to point at my auth reducer. So I can just call or set this equal to auth reducer, and of course, add an import, importing auth reducers from the auth folder, the store folder, and there the auth reducer file. Now we initialize our global store, our NGRX store. And always keep in mind, even if we have different parts of the app where we manage the state with different reducers, we always have just one global store. And we're setting up this global store here by pointing at all these different parts that make up the overall store. So now we registered the auth reducer here, which is a great first step. But now I also want to make one other adjustment. If you take a look at the shopping list reducer, there we of course define how the state should look like for this shopping list part of the application. And we also define how our application state should look like with this app state interface here. Now, to be honest, that doesn't really belong into the shopping list reducer file, because the app state is more than just a shopping list reducer. Now, previously, before we added the auth reducer, we had only the shopping list, but now we have the shopping list and the auth part. And therefore, it's time for a new global store folder, which sits next to my shopping list, recipes, and so on folders. So it's in a root app folder. And in that store folder, I want to add an app.reducer.ts file. And the idea here is that it merges all my other reducers together. So in this app reducer file here, I want to import everything as from shopping list, following that naming connection, from my shopping list folder, there from the store and there from the shopping list reducer, and do just the same as from auth by importing from the auth folder and there from store and the auth reducer. Now why? First of all, because here I now want to create my interface, app state, which now has that shopping list key, where I refer to from shopping list and point at my state, not the app state. I will actually remove that app state interface here from the shopping list reducer, because again, this is the wrong place for defining a global application-wide state. It should only define the state for this part of the global state, so for the shopping list part. And then we'll have to fix some of the other imports and other files, but for now, let's go back to the app reducer. Because there, besides my shopping list slice, I also will add auth and point at from auth state here. So now I'm importing these sub-states of parts of my global store, so of the shopping list and of the auth state, and I'll import these, so of the shopping list and the auth part of my NGRX state, and I merge them together into one app state interface. And of course, it's not just about merging these state definitions. I also want to create a new constant reducers, or app reducer maybe is a better name, and that will be of type action reducer map. And action reducer map is something you have to import from NGRX store. Now this type might be familiar to you, because here in the app module, for root takes such an action reducer map. In the end, what I create here is such an action reducer map. And now instead of dynamically creating it in app module, I want to do that here in the app reducer, simply to structure this in a bit cleaner way. This, so to say, now is the one state, the one store we have in the entire app, and we create it by bringing together all these individual slices we have that make up this global state. Previously, we did this here in app module, but now since I also want to add my own type definition, my own interface for that, I rather do it in a separate file. So app reducer is of type action reducer map, and therefore it is basically a JavaScript object. Now important, this is a generic type, and we need to define which kind of overall state will be the result of that reducer map, and that will be my app state, of course. So the reducer map will have a shopping list and an auth key, and that's therefore what we have to add here. Shopping list, and here we point at from shopping list and then at the shopping list reducer. And for auth, we do the same. We point at from auth and then at the auth reducer. And now with this, we have our app reducer here in the app reducer file. In an app module, we now no longer create this object on the fly, so to say. Instead, we can now get rid of these two imports, so at the shopping list and at the auth reducer imports, and instead import everything as from app or from root, or however you want to call it, from the store folder and there from the app reducer. And here to for root, we can now just pass from app reducer. That is now our merged reducer map. Might seem a bit redundant, but now is a really cleaner setup. Now, what does this mean for the different parts of the app where we injected a store and where we pointed at the app state that previously was exported from the shopping list file? Well, for example, here in the shopping list component, instead of using from shopping list app state, I now want to remove that import and instead import everything as from app from my root store. So in that root store folder from the app reducer. And then we simply replace from shopping list with from app. And this will do the trick because this now gives us access to our overall state where we still have a shopping list slice. But as you see, if you enter just quotes here, TypeScript should kick in and your IDE and give you auto completion that you can either access the off or the shopping list part, because now we have two state slices in our overall state, not just one. And therefore it's the same in the shopping edit component. We can get rid of the from shopping list import and instead import everything as from app, from that root store, and there the app reducer. And then instead of using from shopping list, we use from app, app state. And it's of course the same for the recipe service. There, if we remove from shopping list, we import everything as from app, from our store folder here, from the app reducer. And then again, for assigning this generic type, we use from app, app state. And with that, everything should compile and everything should still work as it did before. Let's quickly check this. Let's fetch recipes and add those ingredients to the shopping list. That all works, but now with this slightly different setup. So that was just some restructuring to have a cleaner code structure and have a store that works fine with multiple state slices, because now we have the shopping list and the off part. With that, let's continue working on that off part though.